Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Unstoppable. I'm your host, Kerwin Ray, and today we talk about health and fitness, but we do it at a whole nother level with my good friend, Shannon Brenton. Shannon Brenton is the go-to naturopath, nutritionalist for many people that you have probably heard of. Anthony Mundine, Kelly Slater, and the South Sydney Rabbitohs, the year of their win, just to name a few. And in this conversation, we talk about intermittent fasting, which I know so many people have been curious about. And trust me when I say this, if you're interested in health, if you're interested in performance, if you're interested in nutrition and intermittent fasting, check this one out. This is one of my favorites. Shannon Brenton, mate, how are you?
Good, mate. Thank you for having me.
Great to have you here, Carl. You've just flown down fresh from the Goldie.
Yeah, mate. 4:30 get up, 6 a.m. flight, and just as long in the car from Mascot to here in the traffic.
Well, at least it doesn't matter how much beauty sleep you get, mate.
Exactly.
You still look just the same.
Thank you.
Mate, look, you and I have been connected for some time now, but for people who don't know who you are, why don't you give us a little bit of a blurb about who you are, what gives you the pedigree that you do?
Yeah, sure. Well, I've been a clinical nutritionist and naturopath for 17 years now, so I've worked full-time over that period of time, 12 to 15 people a day. So I've got, nearly 65,000 people under my belt now. I specialise in two peak areas. The first one is chronic disease, which is obviously the end result of a life not well lived a lot of the time. And the other area is human performance. So without me even knowing what this podcast was about today, kind of
secret squirrel.
It all sorts of falls into place. But in human performance, looking at performance more for athletes, and high-end people who are, and not just pro athletes, but amateurs, people who are wanting to take their performance to the next level. So that'll be about 20% of my work, and then 80% of the work is picking up the pieces from a whole host of chronic diseases, right through from all your inflammatory autoimmune diseases, a lot of cancer, HIV, post-viral syndromes, female reproductive disease, infertility, all those fun subjects, which are my passions.
Quite broad. It's interesting. You mentioned you work with a lot of professional athletes, but you've done a lot of work with me as well.
Yeah.
But I am curious to know
that's who I was talking about.
Oh, you were, of course. I know there was a glint in your eye when you looked at me when you said professional
athlete. Kerwin.
Pretty sure I have been paid to arm wrestle at one stage in my life. But what I'm curious to know is, are you starting to see people adopt, professional athlete habits and routines from a nutrition and a health perspective, just to optimize their performance in business, as an example?
Yeah, for sure. And I think the big thing here is the www. People are exposed to more these days than what they were certainly at the beginning of my career, where it was like just the beginning of dial-up and no one was really into it and really researching these things. Health's obviously become a really big area of exploration as well for a lot of people. So people now are asking questions they weren't asking beforehand. People are exposed to new concepts, exposed to new diets, exposed to new ideologies and methodologies and the like that, once again, they just weren't exposed to. People are asking more questions now. So for sure, the average punter now is looking at themselves as possibly extraordinary, is probably the way I'd look at it. Do you know what I mean? Just because I'm not a pro athlete doesn't mean I can't be a shit hot amateur athlete.
Yeah, right.
Just because I'm not a pro athlete and don't get paid to do this doesn't mean I can't still work 40 hours a week and still do my passion 8 to 10 hours a week and do a bloody good job at it. So for sure, look, I think a lot of people are really pushing the boundaries of their own self-exploration, and they're asking a lot of questions now, and they're demanding answers, and a lot of the time, like scientifically validated answers, and that's where a lot of it now is coming in. Science is really, I wouldn't say stepping up, but science is coming more into people's limelight now, where the average person is now looking at studies and statistics and peer-reviewed studies and the like, and starting to put two and two together and influence it into their own life. Sometimes successfully, and a bulk of the time non-successfully too. I'll say.
Look, I'm very passionate about inspiring business people to, look at what you do, especially when it comes to performance, because when we look at what we do as business people, we are essentially like professional athletes, but our discipline may not necessarily be in the realm of athletics. Yeah. It's almost like someone who goes to the Olympics for skeet shooting. They're not really an athlete, but they're performing at a really high level in a particular discipline. And I think, as business people, we owe it to ourselves to really get our shit tuned into gear so that we really can explore our potential at the highest level in business.
100%. And you know what? It's like my catchphrase with, using sport nutrition, quote unquote, as an example or a topic, I should say. My catchphrase has always been that sport nutrition is just great regular nutrition timed appropriately.
Yeah, right.
So when I cross correlate that between the need of an athlete and the need of a business person, it's not really all that indifferent. Obviously you're not looking at like lactate threshold and recovery and the like, but looking at it from a position of cognitive function, looking at it as a benefit also from blood sugar stabilization, giving that person energy and capability across the day to work more efficiently and effectively, get a better outcome. It's exactly the same thing.
I would even throw in their recovery, because I know for me with the schedule that I have,
to back it up day after day.
Stupid. I know I need to time my recoveries, because if I don't, then I actually burn out. I think it's fair to say that health is one of those words. If you had 30 people in a room and you ask them all to define what good health is, you're going to get 30 different answers. And as you say, with the advent of the internet and access to information, we are more educated, but some people are a lot more confused.
Yes.
How would you define good health? What is it?
I'll tell you how I wouldn't define it first.
Yeah, good.
When you start looking at the definition of health, it's clinically looked at as an absence of pathology. Okay, so it's being able to look at any human body, whether that's just through physical palpation and presentation, whether that's through CT or MRI imaging or X-ray, et cetera, not finding growths, not finding abnormalities or anything that would be deferring organ function.
Yeah,
okay.
Right.
Then looking at it from a serum perspective, it's looking at a clear set of blood, so making sure that everything falls within the parameters that pathology tells us is normal.
Yep.
Okay, so looking at the impact of the environment, of lifestyle, of nutrition, of stress, of all these things on liver and kidney function, red and white blood cells, inflammatory markers, et cetera, et cetera. This is what is clinically considered health. My great problem with that, Kerwin, is that I've spent the last 17 years specialising in the people that don't fall within those boundaries.
Yeah, right.
Okay? So the people that will come to me and say, mate, I'm just so exhausted, I can hardly keep my eyes open at lunchtime. I'm like not just wanting, but requiring things like Red Bull now and, the 3 o'clock Twix or something just in order to sort of keep myself going. I've had ongoing headaches now for months. No one can explain it. I'm requiring, analgesics just to be able to get through the day. Unexplained rashes, things that just interfere with your life, itchy skin, things like this. And then, of course, because I treat a lot of women, it's, a lot of menstrual irregularities. A lot of poor women that are having, 2 weeks out of every month just feeling like shit, all the premenstrual symptoms, of headaches, breast distension, breast pain, nausea, mood swings, sugar cravings, etc. And then, of course, the heavy periods, the painful periods, the clotting, and all the things that affect their life. And these people will go to a normal structured health physician, i.e. a GP, wanting to look at their health, the topic of today's conversation, and all these markers will show that they are actually healthy.
Yeah, right.
But they feel like shit, So when you start looking at what is health, and you put me on the spot, this is a big question, but that's the most important thing for me. What isn't it?
Yep.
And that's what it's not,
Yeah, right.
So many people with these symptoms walking around with their quality of life, and I really want to highlight those 3 words, quality of life. People become so used to living like shit. They become used to having an energy that's 2 or 3 or 4 out of 10. They get used to those headaches. They get used to that itchy skin. They get used to the IBS symptoms. They get used to all these things which are not pathological in nature.
Yep.
And therefore can't actually be resolved with a prescription medication, and therefore never given the time of day. So for me, health is more about how do you look, how do you feel, how are your daily functions, how are your organ functions, how are your monthly functions for women, what do your eyes tell you, do you wake up and they're bloodshot, if you've got yellowing of your scleras. So
it really is individual.
100%.
It's much like a fitness
plan. Of course
it is. It's individual in nature.
Absolutely.
But I also, for me, good health to me is really the ability to do what you want when you want for as long as you want.
Of course.
And what I'm seeing and what I'm curious to know from you is what are you starting to see now, when it comes to the shift in people's health? What are the biggest shifts that you're seeing?
Well, you're seeing new pathologies.
Yep.
You're seeing things like Crohn's disease.
Is that becoming a lot more popular?
Mate, yeah. It's like asthma now.
Yep.
You know, so something that wasn't.
And Crohn's disease is an extension of IBS, which is just
it's an inflammatory bowel disease.
Yep.
Yeah, so it's actually it's far heavier than that, but it's an autoimmune response where the body's attacking generally the terminal ileum and the large bowel, and it causes pain. It causes melena, which is blood in your stool, mucus. It's quite nasty and causes fatigue and a lot of other relatable symptoms, but that's just one example of a condition which wasn't diagnosable 30 years ago. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, right.
So we're looking at some of these conditions. We're looking at a whole bunch of new things, like MTHFR issues and, other things that aren't new but are new to medical science and being looked at and viewed now in a different light. So, we're finding people are becoming more educated. Holistic doctors, for one, are looking for different things, trying to look once again at these quality of life factors based on how the person looks, feels, and expresses themselves during an initial consultation. What do I find a lot of now? Seriously, I just find so much mitochondrial inefficiency. So many demands for more energy, so much more fatigue than I've ever seen before. And it doesn't really matter, what person steps into a clinical setting with me.
When you say mitochondrial demand, for those people who may not be able to connect the dots, what does that mean?
So the mitochondria is an organelle within everyone's cell, so a little machine that produces bioavailable cellular energy. So it makes everything happen. It allows your heart to beat without you even being aware of it. It allows you to run up and down, the pier here or whatever you want to do. But it's ultimately responsible for everything. Yep. And, at the basis of most diseases will come some kind of mitochondrial dysfunction, So things like cardiomyopathy, for instance, you start getting quite significant mitochondrial dysfunction. The body just can't produce enough oomph to actually regulate its own functions appropriately anymore. And these people will keep existing. They'll just feel awful and life becomes a real struggle for them. So, I'm finding that a lot of fatigue, a lot of fatigue. Doesn't matter who it is. Someone comes in with, they want to lose weight or they've got, some sort of allergy or a food sensitivity, and they're often dealing with some level of fatigue as well. A lot of stress. People are more stressed than ever before. People are less connected than ever before. People are less purposeful than ever before. So now you start to get away from those, physiological standpoints of what is health, and you move more into those psycho-emotional and mental parameters where people just aren't feeling right. They're not feeling connected. They're not happy in who they are. A lot of that, So, and I could talk all day about what I see, but I might see, 6 or 7 different things in a day. But a lot of them will always come back to I've got no energy, or my energy is wavering across the course of the day. My sleep's poor, basic stuff.
And it's interesting when you look at the business of energy, caffeine, coffee,
billion-dollar industries,
multi-billion-dollar industries. Yep. But what's interesting is most people don't realize that with good health, good nutrition, you can actually generate more energy than a fucking Red Bull can provide. Of
course you can.
And more energy than a shot of coffee.
And energy, like a Red Bull's no different than a muffin. It just gives you that spike in energy. It just runs your adrenal glands into the ground. And it serves a purpose at certain times. So I don't look at food as good nor bad, Kerwin. It's either appropriate or inappropriate. Yep. And things like, having a Red Bull on a Friday night with your mates with some vodka because that's what you like the taste of. Now, it wouldn't be my choice for an alcoholic beverage, but I can kind of get my head around it on occasion. But it's when these things start to become a daily requirement, okay? And not even a habit. I'm talking a requirement. And you know what I mean by that, right? So got to have that coffee before I can function, or got to do this before I can function. You look at truck drivers that can't do their jobs without amphetamines and these sorts of things. So, we live in a culture, though, where it's bred into us. It's a socialization. And that's partly our problem. You look at, Codral, soldier on, you got a virus. Your virus is telling you to rest. People are losing that communication with their body. The body's saying, slow the fuck down, go horizontal for a week. Other people would just like to take 2 tablets and soldier on.
So it's interesting. We talk about energy because without it, we're fucking useless. Like we literally are bags of skin, with some lumps inside. The more energy we have, the more output we can provide. And the more out we can provide, the greater potential return that we can get, whether it be in our sport or a relationship or even in a business as an example. So what is the biggest mistake that you see people make when it comes to producing more energy?
It's really multifactorial. I'll start with the most basic thing.
Yep.
It's lack of consciousness around sleep and the sleep cycle. That's why they use sleep deficiency as a torture technique. There's nothing that will cruel you like just consistent poor sleep quality. So I find a lot of people will particularly in these days they'll do their work day. Being efficient or inefficient, it's irrelevant at this point. But then come home and wire themselves on too much social media and too many gaming apparatuses and the like, switching their nervous system on, telling their body that it's time to do more of this, stimulating more of these neurotransmitters like dopamine, which are actually winding us up rather than slowing us down in a preparation cycle for sleep. And using sleep as an example, I always say to people, you don't just get out of bed in the morning and go to work. You get out of bed, and let's break it right down. You get out of bed, you do a wee, you brush your teeth, you get dressed. You know what I mean? There's a process that's going on here.
Yep.
Even if you're out of the door in 10 or 15 minutes, there's still a process. And I say to people at night time, there still needs to be that same process. We wind into our day. We have a day.
Yep.
We need to be able to wind out of that day.
Yep.
And it's through these habitual mechanisms that our body actually knows, this is my time to actually rest now. It's actually time to switch on that parasympathetic nervous system, which is the opposite of what I've had on all day while I've been stressed and been functional and been training and been to the gym and all these things. And it's time to focus now on the digestion of food, and it's time now to focus on the restoration and the turnover and repair of our cells. As a result of this, the body will, when well rested, will wake up and be very functional the next day. So, not trying to teach people how to suck eggs, but you ask what's one of the major things I find that leads to energy drains, and it will be a lack of sleep. And it's not the fact that it's lack of sleep per se, it's a lack of protocol around sleep. 2 or 3 days of poor sleep, during travel or during one of your events, for instance, it's neither here nor there. But when this winds up into weeks and months, just take a first time mum, who's got a child and goes through that level of sleep deprivation from having to get up and breastfeed. She is useless, and she knows it, and you know it. Everyone knows it, and that's what a lot of business people are running around like that mother who's just been breastfeeding all night and just feels like shit the next morning, that now has to go and perform.
Yeah, but instead of a baby, they've got a startup or they've got a business.
That's their baby.
Yeah, right.
Absolutely.
So again, so much performance is rooted in the ability to produce energy that we can direct into the pursuits that we do every day.
And that's one example. Sleep's one example.
Okay.
So moving on from there, I know you're dying to ask about nutrition.
No, go. What's this? What you said there was 3. So you said sleep.
So sleep is a primary factor.
Yep.
Okay, that will cause energy drains. Pre-existing ailments is another one.
Yep.
So anything that winds the body into a pro-inflammatory state. So, long-term continued allergy, for instance, food allergy where people aren't even aware that they've got a food allergy, but, they all find in the hours that follow the ingestion of a certain food, it runs them down, they're tired. This whole gut microbiome is setting up an inflammatory immune response. And once again, when the body feels like it's under invasion, it obviously goes into the process of, let's attack where the invasion is. Which means it leaves the rest of the body open. So you won't find anything that will cause energy deficits, more like pre-existing conditions. So if there's anyone listening who, has like Hashimoto's thyroiditis or has, a multiple sclerosis or has an underlying allergy or has, some sort of autoimmune condition or pre-existing condition like that isn't well managed, isn't well...
Even just basic inflammation?
100%.
Yep.
100%. Yeah, very, very exhausting. Because what does it do long term? It results in our body having to produce cortisol all the time, just in an effort to down-regulate it. And then as a long-term effect of that, we get into this state of adrenal insufficiency where the body is just run down. And because of the heightened state of cortisol, this causes insulin resistance, and the insulin resistance makes us fat and tired and just sets up this dirty, big, bloody snowball of endocrine dysfunction. Right. And then outside of that, we move into obviously nutritional deficits. So, if people have got an underlying, mineral deficiency, as an example, so low B12, low iron levels, issues with magnesium, high copper, low zinc, all these sorts of states will cause, once again, a cellular defect, keeping in mind that minerals actually turn on enzymatic processes. Okay, so you look at like something like magnesium. Okay, when you're stressed, your body runs through it like no tomorrow. When you're stressed, your body chews up B vitamins like they don't exist, and vitamin C. Vitamin C is food for the adrenal glands. B vitamins help us to derive energy from carbohydrate. Do you know what I mean? So when we're under load and just pushing, our body is exhausting these resources that actually allow us to take structured energy from our food and drink. And this is where it's important that people realize that just because you put food in your mouth and you put drink in your mouth, it doesn't mean it becomes part of you. You got to get that shit into the cells.
Yeah, right.
You got to be able to digest that food appropriately and actually take the nutrition from it. And, heightened stress and these things will diminish that likelihood of occurring for you. But,
because a lot of people don't realize from the moment you experience a stressful event, cortisol's in the bloodstream. Within about 7 minutes, your digestion is affected.
Turned off.
Yeah.
If I put a gun to your head, you'll shit your pants right now. And that's just an effect. And that's not because you're so scared. It's because the body is having to put its energy to where it's necessary. You need to kick, scream, punch, and get out of here. Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
So stress doesn't always need to be that acute or that intrinsic that we'd be like, like my life's not like that.
Yep.
No one's got a gun to my head. But the problem with stress is people forget what stress is, Kerwin. People are like, oh no, I'm not stressed.
Well, once upon a time, stress was a fucking saber-toothed tiger at the cave wall.
That's right.
Now most people are stressing because they didn't get more than 20 likes on their Instagram.
That's right.
Picture.
But even at a higher level, you ask Octo Mum if she's stressed. She'll probably tell you she's not, because she's adapted to it. And this is what we do. We adapt to our environment. So sometimes it's about actually being able to step back from it, and go, okay, well, what's my body telling me? And this is where this whole process of being, having a heightened sensitivity and a heightened level of communication to what your body's saying becomes very important. Because if you've got continual long-term energy defects, well, there's a problem and you'd best find out what it is.
What's the most solid and sound base nutrition required to perform at a really high level and have enormous amounts of energy?
All right. Well, I'm going to answer that real simply because that's like you've just opened up a massive can of worms.
Well, I want to try and keep it contextualized because I know there's a lot of people who are going, well, we hear so much about the importance of nutrition and nutrients, and then we have these macro things and these micro things. Fuck. So how would you simplify it in a way that we can understand what a macro is, what a micro is, and really simply, what the fuck do I eat in order to perform it like a,
I'll get onto macros and micros in a tick. I'd say the first thing when you start talking about like what is it that builds the backbone of an appropriate nutritional protocol for people that are after performance, be that in business or on the paddock or wherever it might be, it will be a reduction, like heavy reduction or complete cessation of processed food. Processed food is really the greatest problem we have in today's day and age. And everyone's guilty of it, and everyone knows that. But people become so reliant upon, and I'd say to people, next time you go to Coles or Woolies or Aldi or wherever you like to shop, when you're standing there at the register and you're about to put everything up on the little conveyor belt thing there, just look in your trolley. Tell me how much of that is in a box, is in a tin, is canned, et cetera, et cetera. Check the use by date on that. Just know that these things are produced in order to maximize taste and maximize the expiry date. That's what food. Commercial food production is about. How do we make it tasty? How do we make it slightly addictive? And how do we make sure that it's got 2 years on the shelf so we can sell more of it to wholesalers and not have to worry about when the end date is? They're in business too. Do you know what I mean? So business is business. So reduction in processed food is absolutely paramount. And when people start looking at, should I be paleo or like right now the vegan diet's getting a massive push. You know what I mean? Should I be vegan? I watch Forks Over Knives and I saw what they do to animals and whatever. You got to understand that what it is about veganism that helps it along is not necessarily the fact that it's like meat versus no meat. It's the fact that when you eat your animal now, Kerwin, when was it killed? Do you know? So just through the processing of the way everything's happening now, back in the day, we shot something and, we grilled it up and ate it. These days, how old is your steak when you have it? Where did it come from? What kind of life did it have? What was it fed on? What was that processing like? How was its level of fear? What was running through its body at the time that it died? What's gone into its flesh?
All factors which affect not only the quality of the meat, but also the hormone levels.
100%. 100%. Yep. So,
And I just want to make this known. I stand for plants.
Yeah.
Because no one else does.
Yeah.
All these vegans out there fucking mowing down plants, eating vegetables and pulling them out of the ground like they have no feelings. It has been scientifically proven that plants have feelings too.
That's right.
Just saying that.
Yeah. But yeah, lack of processed food becomes very, very important, So I'm a big fan of people being able to produce their own food from raw ingredients, And you can get all on your high horse about, this was grown locally and, this is sustainably sourced and blah, blah, blah. It's less about that. Okay, that's another discussion. It's less about that and more about the fact that, it is just less processed.
Yep.
That's a big part. So moving on now to macros and micros. I know this is a source of confusion. So micro minerals are basically relating to vitamins, minerals, and antioxidants. Okay, so these are the things which are catalyzing or switching on cellular processes and allowing for those macros to be moved into the right places and to give the body and the cells what it needs for repair, for optimal turnover, for protein manufacture, for doing the things cells do. I don't want to bore people with too much of that, but when you look then at the macronutrients are obviously the foods themselves. So it's your proteins, it's your fats, and it's your carbohydrates. Okay, so micro minerals are something that people have less control over with food ingestion these days, just through growing techniques and soil deprivation and a lot of these things that are a problem for us now. But basically, though, when you're eating, lots of green leafies and, lots of colored vegetables, you're getting a lot of these plant compounds, you're getting a lot of these antioxidants through different colors. You're getting your carotenoids and things from like your sweet potato and your carrots. You're getting your oligometric proanthocyanidins, which are a strong antioxidant molecule from like your blueberries and pomegranates and strawberries and things like this. You're getting a lot of like chlorophyll and sulforaphane and indole-3 carbonol and other really important compounds from things like cruciferous vegetables like broccoli and cauliflower and the like. So
I feel like I'm learning a new language right now.
yeah. It's important people know these things, what I mean? But generally what I'm saying to people here is it all comes back to eating a broad variety.
Yep.
It's all about the color. It's all about the fact that it's fresh. It's all about the fact that it wasn't pulled out of the ground and frozen straight away.
And is this where some people get health wrong? Like they think, well, as long as I'm eating, colored veggies and everything else and proteins and fat, but if they're eating the same thing every single day, because that's what a lot of these people do, like, right, they get in this whole meal prep scenario and I'll just have chicken and fucking broccoli and or fish and broccoli or fish and salad every day. Is it like
lack of variety is a problem? Yes.
There we go. Okay.
And I'll give you an example of that
because it can not only become a problem with nutrient absorption, but it also can create allergies as well, right?
Of course.
Yep.
But I'll give you an example. And look, this is a study that I knew of a long while back, so I can't quote a source or anything. I can't even quote a time. It was about 8 or 10 years ago. But there was a study done between the American diet and the Swiss diet. And the reason the study was done was it was found that the Swiss diet was higher in saturated fat than the American diet. But the cardiovascular mortality rate was significantly lower, like didn't even compare. And obviously, looking at this whole lipid hypothesis of the fact that saturated fat's evil and fat kills you, which is obviously, sort of in the process of being debunked now, they did a cross-correlation of these two diets and found that there was, in fact, more saturated fat in the Swiss diet at the time. But the thing about the Swiss diet that led to much lower rates of cardiovascular disease was the fact that they had a massive source of nutrient intake. So yes, they ate the pastries and the like, and a lot of like cream and these sorts of things, but they ate from a myriad of food groups, and what this does is each food is kind of providing something that combats the effect of something else. You know what I mean? Their diet as a result was higher in fiber. And you look at something like bowel disease, for instance, bowel cancer, one of the top 3, as a matter of fact, biggest killers of people in Western society. It's directly correlated to an overconsumption of red meat and processed meats, and also to a low fiber diet. So if you're having a whole bunch of saturated fat and you're having quite low fiber intake, you got some trouble going on, So that was just one example showing a cross-correlation between two countries, that the country that had the broadest ingestion of food groups. So they were eating, like all the vegetables, different colors, different shapes and sizes and all the rest of it. They were having seafood. They were having grains, they were having, red meat, they were having chicken, they were having the whole deal, but there was a broad parameter of what they were using. You look at America, a lot of their foods were just cooked in this study in cottonseed oil and canola oil. Over in the Swiss countries, there was a lot more, extra virgin olive oil and macadamia nut oils and different oils, higher intake of polyunsaturated fats, giving them essential fatty acids that a lot of the Americans were missing out on. And as a result, a higher likelihood that their bodies would be creating some kind of pro-inflammatory event.
So how often should we then rotate our menu?
Yeah.
As an example.
I'll tell you what, I can only use me as an example because it's going to be easy for people to understand. But like with dinners, for instance, I have 6 dinners on constant rotation.
Yeah, right.
And the reason why I do that is it makes my life easy. Simple as that. Do you know what I mean? I do all the shopping for our family. So when I go to Coles or Woolies or wherever I'm going, or to a farmer's market, I know exactly what I need. It doesn't change week in, week out. I can buy in bulk. I can get better quality produce at cheaper prices, etc. And we have 6 meals on really tasty, extremely flavoursome, very, very nutritious, that are on constant rotation. And, you think 6 meals that all taste great. It'd be like, hey, Kerwin, do you think you could have this once a week? Oh, absolutely. I have it 5 times a week. Do you know what I mean? One of those sorts of meals that was just on constant rotation that, once again, you can cook more. I can use that extra for like kids' lunches the next day or for our lunches the next day, whatever it might be. So it's all about trying to make life easy for people. Yep. I think the issue with food for people is the overwhelm in I want to do what's good for my body, but I also need to do what's good for my pocket, and I need to do what's good for my lifestyle. Yep. The minute food becomes a stress, it's so easy to just go and get takeaway Thai or, grab that takeaway really sandwich. Do you know what I mean? Yep. So it needs to be something which is maintainable for people. It needs to be something that we have longevity in because, eating well for like a 30-day challenge, for instance, that's all well and good, but like that's just normal eating for me. Yep. And so when people get all pumped on doing a protocol that's short-term, those short-term protocols are generally put in place to inspire. It's to put an aspiration in place where people can go, wow, like I feel so much better doing this, but not only do I feel better, but I actually enjoy the food. And I might start to bring some of this now into what I do.
It becomes a way of life.
100%.
Yeah.
Way of life. Yeah. Exactly right.
Yeah.
So that's exactly what we're looking at here. But how do we structure our food? Well, structuring our food is looking at what does food give us. So when we start to look at, just for instance, fruit and vegetables particularly are quite calorically low, so they don't provide us a lot of calories. So a calorie is just a unit of energy. So they don't give us a lot of energy, but they give us a lot of those plant-based compounds and minerals and vitamins that make our body use the macros more effectively. So when I look at I have around sort of 6 to 8 cups a day of vegetables of all different sorts of colors and cooked all different sorts of ways as well, I must say. When I have them, I don't even really look at them as a macronutrient source because my 6 to 8 cups of the ones I choose to eat, seriously, I'm lucky. I'm lucky to get 50 or 60 grams of carbohydrate, which if we just work on 50, make my maths really easy, it's 200 calories. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's so obscure. It barely even needs to be kind of worked within my regime because I train so much and I'm active, So I have those simply to get these plant compounds to make sure that my body's getting more of these micronutrients that are absolutely necessary for cellular function. On top of that, macronutrients have specific use. So carbohydrates are just about energy. That's it. The body will use a carbohydrate food source as energy now, or it will stick it in the liver or skeletal tissue as glycogen and use it later, or it will stick it in fat stores as free fatty acids and use it later again. Okay, so it's just like a big funnel. Everything will just become sugar at the end of the day. Everything just becomes carbohydrate, and glucose, which is a simple form of carbohydrate, is that simple use which our body uses effectively and efficiently to produce energy, okay? But carbs just gives us energy. So when you come home from work or you'll start your day, for instance. So when you start your day with 2 bits of toast with butter and honey, for instance, well, that's a massive energy intake. I'm not going to say whether that's good or bad right now, but that's an energy intake, and we're about to go and do things now that require energy. So on that simple level, it makes some sense. When we look at the end of the day, though, we come home, we are tired, okay? That Twix bar didn't work too well. The coffees have just kind of fallen us on our ass again, and we come home and have a couple of bits of toast because it's easy, right? Toaster's there, there's the bread, put it down, throw a bit of jam on there. we're winding down for the night now. We're not going to go and do anything with this. So our body basically has that choice of, do I use this for energy or do I store it? So for me, and for a lot of other people who are considered experts in this space, carbohydrate it's like a deserved macronutrient. It's always a question of, do I require what it's giving me? Do I need the energy? Is it what my body is needing to work with right now? When you look at proteins are used also for energy. So the body can break protein down into carbohydrate. This is the benefit. And this is why a lot of people find they do really well on low carb diets, because the body can just break fats and proteins down into carbohydrate anyway. So you're never actually void of carbohydrate. It just means the body has to go through a process called gluconeogenesis to find it elsewhere. Okay. So with protein, though, it's essentially being used.
A lot of people call fat adaptation. Is that right?
No. Fat adaptation. Well, gluconeogenesis will allow fat adaptation, but it'll depend on, you'd have to completely relinquish all glycogen stores for days before you get to the point where the body was going to actually want to use fat as its prime source of fuel. So for as long as you're putting carbohydrate in, the body will always use it as its preferred source. Okay. So fat's like its last reserve. It'll use if all hell's broken loose and there's nothing else to use there. Okay. So protein is growth, repair, and restoration, though. It's giving our body that repair. And, there is not an enzymatic process in the body that isn't protein-based, okay? All enzymes are protein, okay? All muscle tissue is protein, okay? Protein is a massive, massive, massive requirement in our body. But the problem is, if you go on like a super low carbohydrate diet with a higher protein diet, well, the body will just utilize those amino acids from the protein breakdown process for energy, turning it back into sugar. So there always needs to be kind of a happy process where we can make sure that we can, what we call protein spare. Okay, we want to be able to protein spare. We want our protein to be used for growth, repair, and restoration, energy stabilization, rather than just being used because there's not one carbohydrate anywhere around to be used. Okay, this is where a high fat, low carb, moderate protein diet comes in for a lot of people. So what they'll do is they'll pull their carbs right back. They'll give their body a big hit of fat instead and reasonable amounts of protein. And once again, that has a protein sparing effect. So this is where you'll become what you refer to as fat adapted. Okay, so the body will start to run into mild endogenous ketone states where it will break those fatty acids down stored in our fat cells, and it will utilize them as an energy source by converting them to a ketone body and then converting that ketone body into acetyl-CoA, which enters the Krebs cycle inside that mitochondria in the cell and just makes energy. Okay.
And this is where, like, for me, when we look about becoming fat adapted and the ability to produce ketones on a regular basis and burn and create and burn energy in this way, is this an optimal way to perform?
It's most definitely optimal. Without thinking of it as optimal or not optimal, what I will say is that it's guaranteed. Okay. Whereas when you play that carbohydrate game, it's like getting that sand hourglass and turning it upside down. You know what I mean? So now we start to run that risk of becoming hypoglycemic. Anyone with anxiety will know that their anxiety will always be worse when their blood sugars shit themselves. And the problem I have, particularly with business people playing that game and sort of having this up and down process of blood sugars high, blood sugars low, blood sugars high, blood sugars low, is that it's the business people that forget to eat. Or, no, I've got a meeting, I can't eat, or I've got to go out and do a business meeting and it's at a bar and we're going to get on the piss instead of eat food. And these people then start to get into this state where their blood sugars are really destable and they become very, very, very inefficient. So they're the people that are predominant carbohydrate burners. Okay. When, however, people are on a higher fat regime, the benefit of fat is it supplies double the calories more. So we're getting 9 calories per gram of fat versus 4 calories per gram of carbohydrate or protein. So when we have a fat-rich meal, it's often a calorie-laden meal as well. Okay?
And it's efficient.
It's very efficient, 100%. And it's the reason why, great white sharks eat seals, People don't get eaten by great white sharks. They bite our leg off and go, oh, fuck, what's this? Do you know what I mean? They want to go after things that are really fat-rich. They love whale blubber. They love seals and that, because if they've got to do a migration down south over to Africa or whatever, they're not going to eat for long periods of time appropriately. And so once again, it's just, this is a creature thing now. We're creatures as well. They're just wanting to give themselves massive intake of calories as fast as possible so we can have this slow burn over a long period of time. So that slow burn with fats still applies to people. So in the course of your day, you've got a reasonably long day, right? So down here in the city, most people are working 8 to 12 hour days, and that's a long burn. Most of these people are not taking food to work with them, so I can only assume that they're going to the takeaway shop or whatever. So seriously, when I look at food, even today, for me to come down here, I got up at 4:30 this morning. I got a 6 a.m. flight. I've prepared myself for this interview. Do you know what I mean? I might not get lunch today because I've got to haul from here straight to the airport and then get back up to the Gold Coast. So there is every likelihood that today I wasn't going to get to eat. So I prepare for that day. The amount of people who get up and go to work and there's never a thought about food, seriously, it blows my mind. It completely blows my mind. Athletes don't leave that to chance, okay? Because they know, like, I've got to have that premium in me to go and train, whereas the average business person runs the tank low and goes and grabs some E10.
Yeah, right. So do we, I remember reading a study, and I think you might have even quoted it when we had you speak for the K2s, that rats, the laboratory rats that were on a radically reduced caloric intake, in some cases were able to live, I think it was as long as 25% longer.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Well, now you get onto the subject of fasting, and fasting extends life.
Well, before we go to fasting, I want to ask this question because I've seen that there's a real psychology around the food industry that has been, essentially we've been trained like monkeys to consume, at particular times and in particular quantities. And I've learned an enormous amount, going through the intermittent fast, having been fasting, 7 to 10 days at a time, as many as, sometimes up to twice a year since 2000, and then adapting to the intermittent fasting. I've become incredibly shocked at how much energy that can be produced with so little intake. But to ask the question before we dive right into it is, do we eat too much and do we eat too often?
Most of the time, yes. Yeah, food's become a comfort. You got to look at what food is for people. Like, food is fuel.
It's become a form of entertainment.
100%. Yeah, like we love via food. We share stories over food. We reconnect via food. So food is so much more to us than simple caloric intake. And I love that, I got to say. But it becomes a massive retardation for people that utilize it like that all the time. I'll utilize it the same way on a Sunday morning. I'll go and have pancakes with the wife and kids at a cafe. Like I said, food for me is appropriate or not, not good or bad, So I would never eat that sort of thing during the week, but come the weekend, if I wanted it, I'd have it.
Yeah, right.
And, we'd bond as well, and the kids would have their baby chino, and I'd let them have their marshmallow and things, but they know, after family day on Sunday, you don't ask for that shit the rest of the day. It's just the way it is, So I don't like to scare people with food. Like I said beforehand, the minute food becomes a stress, I lose people. So it's about being able to implore people with food to understand that they take their performance and their rate of efficiency, the same thing effectively, into their own hands by what they put in their mouth.
But you've also got to put a high value on your own performance in order to really make the shift. Because I know for me, it's been since last year, I now eat probably 3 days a week. I'm eating once a day. The other 2 days a week, I may be eating twice a day, and there's at least once a week and sometimes more where I'm not eating for 24 hours at a time. Now, what's really interesting, and we'll go into the science about it in a minute, is first of all, efficiency. I don't eat breakfast, and in most cases, if I'm not going to eat, if I'm only going to have one meal, I won't eat lunch. Which means that I can get up at 4:30 in the morning and I can literally power through until I come home at 4 o'clock in the afternoon to pick up my son without having to, and again, this you might be saying, well, fucking okay, man, this is not necessarily a good thing. I can go back to back, literally, as long as I'm hydrating, as long as I take maybe a little bit of ketones, and as long as I'm, again, the key thing for me is hydrating, I can just keep going. I can just keep going and not only maintain high levels of energy, but also clarity as well. this is so fucking counterintuitive for because most people go, if I go 30 minutes past, 1 o'clock, I'm starting to get a headache.
Yeah.
So how is it that, that some of us can perform on very little food and other people just freak out at the fucking idea? And what's the science behind it? How can we understand the science in a way that'll empower us to want to look at food differently, to maybe consider, intermittent fasting as an option?
Well, for you, there's a couple of factors there to consider. The first one is you've done this for a long time.
Yep.
And I know when you've headed off to Thailand and done, 7-10 day retreats without eating at all and juice fasting and stuff. So, you number one emotionally know what to expect.
Yep.
Okay. A lot of people stress out mentally. Fuck, I haven't eaten breakfast, or I haven't had lunch, or what's this going to mean for me? And they almost talk themselves into a panic. But a lot of the time, these people are very, very carbohydrate dominant eaters. Okay. And I want to stress again that what happens when we eat carbohydrate is we start this process of elevating blood sugars, elevating insulin, dropping blood sugars, dropping insulin. Okay. So postprandially, which is after we eat, there's always a dip in blood sugar and therefore insulin when you've had a big carbohydrate-rich meal, okay? And now we start this process of going through it. Now, with you, Kerwin, you're very well fat adapted, okay? And you also have got a high rate of keto adaptation. So your body has learnt over time, well, this is what we can do. This is how we function well. And your relationship with your body, you listen to it, you observe it, and you do what it wants. So when you might say, hey, Kerwin, that's not good. You shouldn't do it. I actually wouldn't say that, because if it works for you and it's working well, that's the answer. If you are efficient and you feel well, that's always the answer.
Yep.
Okay. I'm simple guidance. Do you know what I mean? I'm not necessarily, this is right, this is wrong. Anyone that tries to tell you with any nutritional regime that like, this is what you should do and this is what you shouldn't do, stay away from them. Okay. It doesn't work that way. And with people, it doesn't work that way. Now, what happens with fasting, which is what you're doing, is, and particularly when you start using exogenous ketones, which you're also using, what happens is that we start to increase the rate of mitochondrial biogenesis, which means that we produce more of those little energy units inside our cell, which make ATP, which is essentially our energy. That's what we use for energy. Okay. So by going through that phase, not only do we increase our autophagy rate, so our cellular detoxification and our body's turnover of cells, but what we do is we increase the amount of these mitochondria we have. And this is what happens with athletes as well. So when you've got really hardcore, particularly cardio dominant athletes like boxers and runners and these sorts of people, they have got more mitochondria than the average person, okay? Which is the reason why I could never make sense, particularly of boxers over the years. I could never make sense how they were so efficient when I'd pull their diets back and see they're only on like 1,300 calories. How can you train 4 hours a day and only have that many calories? And it all comes down to the fact of their cellular efficiency response.
Yeah, right.
Okay, so the body is always looking to adapt once again to what you tell it. So when you give the body a meal, you're giving it an order effectively. You're telling it what to do. You're telling it what hormones to upregulate. You're telling it what hormones to downregulate. You're telling it exactly what it needs to do. So we can't then get upset when our body, does what we asked it to do based upon the food, because we never asked the question. You are asking questions. And so when you start to go through fasting protocols, like I'm talking real life now, like an intermittent fast rather than just a full fast, when you go through an intermittent fast, well, firstly, you're increasing your brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which is a compound which basically increases our memory and recall. Okay, so when you start talking about, hey, when I fast, I just feel like on mentally, that's because of this BDNF, which is upregulated when you're in a fasting state. And that's one of the great things for business people with intermittent fasting. And like I've always said about intermittent fasting, and like I said to the K2ers when I lectured there a couple of months ago, was intermittent fasting, effectively, it's just nutritional flexibility. Like who doesn't want more flexibility? Any business person that I know who I put on intermittent fasts, at first they're a bit scared, right? Because it's awkward. It's like, hang on, for the first time now in like 40 years, you're telling me I can't get up and have my Cheerios? Do you know what I mean? It's breaking habit. And breaking habit is a little bit traumatic because it takes us out of our comfort zone, right? But when they get into this process of, hang on, I'm now getting up, I'm feeling well, I'm waking with more energy than I've ever had beforehand, and I'm able to like actually get up and be out of the fucking place an hour earlier and get an hour more work done. What they notice in their business is exponential, because they either get an extra hour or more in their day, or they get so much more done early, that they knock off early and go and have a surf or go rock climbing or something. You know what I mean? So, this is the whole 4-hour work week type thing. It's all about like, get more efficiency, get more done now. Yeah. Don't have a fucking half-assed 8-hour day. Have a really good, half-day type scenario, or be as efficient as possible for 8 hours and get more done. Have a longer holiday when you go away with your family. But effectively what's happening for you is you're fat adapted, okay? And when you fat adapt, you get into this process of being able to generate low levels of ketone bodies from your liver. So it's basically taking free fatty acids inside your fat cells and liberating ketone bodies from this. So rather than eating carbohydrate, which gives us sugar, and sugar, which then enters the Krebs cycle and gives us ATP, what we do is we just go through a more complex chemical process now where these ketones are converted to acetyl-CoA, and that converted to coenzyme A, and then coenzyme A enters the Krebs cycle and gives us energy. So at the end of the day, it's all the same fucking thing.
Yep.
It's all energy. Do you know what I mean? It's just about what process are we going through to create it, and what hormones are we optimizing in order to make that happen.
Is all energy created equal? Like,
No.
Because we would talk about calories, all calories are different.
Yep.
So will the quality of where that energy originates from determine the quality of the energy?
Of course.
Yep.
Yeah. And even looking at carbohydrate, and now I'm not a low carber, just so you know.
Yep.
Like I intermittent fast and have for a very long time, but I have quite a high carbohydrate intake.
Yep.
My body does very well for it, but I use it in a carb backload method, which works really well for me. Train later in the day, carb backload with my evening meal. Always lean and fit, feel good from it, and then get up the next day and don't eat again until 1 o'clock, and once again very well fat adapted, but on a high carbohydrate intake. When you start looking at carbs though, so I don't want once again people to be scared of carbs, because there's nothing to be scared of, but you're asking about the quality of that energy. So if I get up and have, I
guess what I'm trying to contrast here is, if I'm going to consider being either, use carbohydrates for energy, or if I'm going to become fat adapted and use that for energy, what's the difference?
Well, you're burning double the calories from the fat. So you're ingesting double the calories, you're giving double the calories, but you're not requiring insulin to metabolize it. Okay, and so insulin is
plus you're also getting these other benefits of, the brain clarity,
brain function, exactly right, and
lower levels of inflammation.
And every time, and that's a big kicker, isn't it? But insulin's really problematic because it's a prolific hormone. It grows things. Okay, so cancer cells have a 5 times greater uptake of glucose than any other cell in your body. So if you find out you've got cancer, the very best diet you go on is a ketogenic diet. Okay, because it will starve the growth of that malignant tumor. Yep. And that's where things like ketosis and ketogenic diets are so good. If you look at things like seizure disorders and whatnot, there is nothing like a ketogenic diet. And as a matter of fact, the ketogenic diet is really the only medical grade diet ever. It's been used since the 1920s to control such symptoms without the use of medication. So when you look at carbohydrates, so just as an energy form, we'll just look at the high and low glycemic effect of it. So if I get up and have, 3/4 of a cup of oat groats, okay, so not Uncle Toby's rolled processed oats, if I get the actual whole oat here and I cook that up and I make that into a nice tasty porridge, versus getting up and having, 3 Weet-Bix with milk, as an example, I've got a very, very different burn with that carbohydrate, even though they're both carbohydrate dominant meals. One will give me a nice sort of slow, continual blood sugar elevation, therefore a slow, continual rise in insulin, won't drop me on my ass, at the sort of 2-hour mark like the other one will. And the other one, will give me this kind of, instant gratification, quick hit, and then down I go again. And at that point, my body will give me an order. What will that order be?
More
Feed
energy.
me. Yeah, give me food. Or give me something that'll energize me. So it'll either be looking for caffeine, it'll be looking for a sweet drink, or it'll look for a little lolly, or it'll look for a meal. And so once again, this is where people have to beg that question. Well, what do I need right now? What's the rest of my day look like? And what have I done leading up to it? So I always carb load after I train. I've got reduced glycogen stores. I've got higher requirement for suppressing a protein complex called AMP-K, which is keeping him in a very catabolic state. I don't want that anymore. Carbohydrate helps with that. So carbohydrate does many, many, many good things for athletes.
Yes.
Okay. So when you're taking the average business punter, though, how athletic are they? So 9 times out of 10, they're not very athletic at all. As a matter of fact, they're generally, sorry for the judgment, guys, but they're generally a bit overweight. They haven't trained for a long time. They've got low back problems. They can't run around with their own kids very well and chase footballs for too long. Once again, sorry for the judgment, but it's just what I see over and over and over and over again.
And I hear it and I see it as well, but I just find the irony is in output.
Yeah.
Because, as business people, we live and die on our ability to produce outcomes, on our ability to produce a return on the efforts and the energy that we have. And the more energy, the more effort, the greater levels of return.
And just watch your business go to shit when your first pathology gets thrown on you. Those vague symptoms of being unwell, that vague sort of quality of life that you haven't looked at for the last 10, 15, 20, 25 years, when that actually turns itself over into one of those pathologies, which now is able to be seen via a scan or via a set of bloods, for instance, watch how fast you take your eye off your business.
Yeah.
Because now our mortal coil gets pulled on, doesn't it?
Well, I think it was the Dalai Lama who said, I don't understand the Western dilemma. These men and women spend all their life trying to make money, and then they spend all their money
trying to get well again. I love that. Isn't
spend
that
all
great?
their health trying to make money, and all their money trying to get their health back
again.
So we've talked a lot about intermittent fasting. We should probably give people some practical structure. What is intermittent fasting from a diet perspective?
So just nice and simple. It's not a diet, okay? And so effectively, anyone listening doesn't even really need to change their diet if they don't want, even though I would.
Yep, great frame.
People don't have to change anything, and I guess once again that's just taking that fear away. But intermittent fasting is essentially an eating protocol where we are either working between fed states or fasted states. It's as simple as that. So there are various different types of intermittent fasts. The prime one that most doctors who are into this stuff, which is not many of them, but those who are, will generally use a thing called the 5 and 2, which is just 2 days a week of a heavy caloric restriction. Okay. Once again, to give the body a rest, to give the digestive process a rest. And that's important for people to realize that it never gets a rest, does it? You're either eating, digesting, detoxifying, excreting, absorbing. You're always doing something. And so the benefit of a 5 and 2 is 2 days a week, you go from eating normal to eating 500 calories in that day for a woman and 600 calories in that day for a man. And it becomes it's easy to do. And I think that's why a lot of doctors go for it, that it gives better patient compliance.
Yep.
Not my favorite at all.
Yep.
I don't find it gives as fast a result.
Agreed, yeah.
But it is really good for compliance. And when you're looking at like the average person, it's always 80-20.
It's a good gateway. It's good introduction.
Well, it's a good start. You're right. Then you're looking at what we call the 16 and 8, which is probably the most preferred method by most practitioners. Once again, still has good compliance, gives much greater result for the average person, and has a lot of science also to back it up. So this is where we are fasting for a 16-hour period, which also includes our sleep period, and we're eating for an 8-hour period. So for me, we should
point out that doesn't mean you're eating for 8 hours solid.
No, that's right.
It just means you have a window from when you choose to eat meals.
Exactly right. And the thing to remember though is even without taking that choice away, if people wanted to eat for 8 hours, it will still have a good effect for them.
That's a good point.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, what you find though is when I get people who are a bit terrified of the whole idea, I say to them, just eat for 8 and don't eat for 16. And I let them eat whatever they want in that 8-hour period. And this is once again, just allowing them to come to terms with a new habit.
Yep.
Taking that stress away, taking the fear away, just realizing I'm not going to die. Okay. That's what it's about for a lot of people. I'm not going to die without doing these things in this period. And so for those people, they can do that. But once again, as an effect of this increased mitochondrial biogenesis and increased, BDNF and cognitive function, what you generally find is that people don't want to eat as much. So you also get, pretty heavy reductions in a hormone called ghrelin, which is a gut-mediated hormone, which tells us we're hungry. Okay, and this is once again the benefit of ketones. So when you're in a keto-adapted state, we get a suppression generally, in most people, of this hormone ghrelin, which is the relationship between our gut and our brain saying, feed me. So what you'll find at first when people start intermittent fasting on, say, a 16 and 8, is they'll get to 1 o'clock, they'll feel like their throat's being cut and they will just want to mow anything in sight, okay? But as they move through this process, you find so many people that'll be 3-4 months into it that'll get to 1 and go, it's 1. It's time to eat now, So it's just an adaptation process. And, it's like anything. If you're going to, get your car turned into, go from petrol to gas, there's an adaptation process. There's a conversion that has to happen to make this happen, So we might find that our petrol engine, our big V8 Land Cruiser or whatever, doesn't run as effective on the gas, but it runs for a shitload longer and we still feel well in it. Might not have as much torque, as much grunt, as much get off the line as what the petrol does when we first use it, but it's far more efficient and it works better for us and it's much cheaper at the Bowser. So we go through the process. When it comes to a fat adaptation though, which is happening now in this fasted state, it's just our brain now having to re-regulate the message. And the message is basically saying, all right, we're expending more than we're ingesting now. This is abnormal for us. How do we adapt to it? Okay, what do we need to do? So the first port of call is the body will go into a process called glycolysis. And in this state, it'll just seek to break down the glycogen that's in our liver and our skeletal muscle, a few thousand calories generally. And it will want to just tap that back into sugar, okay? Because it's the fastest way of getting sugar into my bloodstream now, because that's what I'm used to burning, okay? So, people will generally have those first few days because of this process until they burn that glycogen out. We're still quite carb adapted now, and the body's still using carbs for energy, even though we're not feeding it. We're feeding it differently. As we advance through this process, the brain literally scratches its own head, and says, well, hang on, you're not feeding me at this time of day. I don't have enough glycogen as a reserve. Where do I get energy from now? And this is when we get into this gluconeogenic mechanism, where the body will start to look at using fats as an energy option. Okay, so fat is always an energy option. The body's always looking at, what am I going to do if World War III happens right now and I don't eat for 2 weeks? And this is why the body can go without food for a couple of weeks. No problems. Can't go without water that long. 3 days you'll go without water till you're dead, but the body can go without food. And the whole time this is happening, it's just turning everything else that you've got, your fat, your muscle, broken down red blood cells, everything, just converting it all into sugar. Okay, but the benefit of fat here is it can bypass this process, and the fat itself will get turned into these ketones, and the ketones then go through a process of supplying ATP. As a matter of fact, more of that than you're getting from blood glucose. So it just gives our body a state of efficiency that it just doesn't get through blood sugar sources.
Yeah, right. And why is it that these kind of protocols are so effective in dealing, in some cases, with chronic disease?
Well, when you're looking at chronic disease, you name one, and I can tell you right now, it's generally got an inflammatory backbone.
Yep.
Okay, so when you're looking at, say, any autoimmune disease, so when we go and get blood tests taken, Kerwin, now I've looked over lots of your bloods over the years as an example. So when we get bloods done, there's 2 key markers in there for inflammation. One of those is called erythrocyte sedimentation rate, which is ESR. And ESR is effectively how fast the erythrocytes or red blood cells move off plasma when centrifuged. And it's all to do with that sedimentation. And the higher the rate of inflammation, the higher this ESR rate, okay? The other one is called C-reactive protein, which I know most people these days have generally heard, but C-reactive protein is a measure of an inflammatory marker called interleukin-6, okay? So when your CRP is up, you have got a chronic inflammatory process going on, and it's driven from this interleukin-6 hormone, okay? So the reason why these diets work really well is because, particularly with ketones have a suppression effect on inflammasomes, which is basically a cellular processing which tells the body to turn inflammation on. Okay, so it has, and this is the really exciting thing in ketone research these days. You got to remember ketosis has been around since the 20s, like I said before. As a matter of fact, thousands of years, really, like the Eskimos and people like this have been on keto-based diets for a long time. But looking at it from like a medical grade standpoint, ketosis has been used, like I said, as a medical food type for a long period of time, specifically for seizure-related disorders. But when you look at its ability to suppress inflammation, it's significant. Okay, so when people start to go on these diets, that's where the effect comes. Plus, because generally these people are eating less grain, they're having less of this omega-6 ingestion, and as a result, their omega-3 to omega-6 essential fatty acid ratio rate will self-correct, and that will come to a point where it should be. Grain is a really bad thing. Grain's been killing us for a long time. Neanderthal man never hunted down a bowl of wheat. It was just the way it was. So when you start looking at the way things have become, grain was influenced into our civilization. Excluding like China, for instance, where rice has been eaten for a couple of thousand years. Once again, gluten-free source though. But when you start looking at what we've, been able to come to now, grain was cheap post-industrial revolution. You could grow it. We got this great, sun-rich country that could grow it. It was cheap to manufacture. It was easy to store. You could feed your 13 kids with it. It filled every bastard up, and it was cheap, and that was all it was. And here we are now, once again, in affluent middle to upper class society, having grain breakfast, lunch and dinner. And as a result of this, we have a really high intake of these omega-6s, which are problematic. And that does suppress the essential fatty acid ratios between our omega-5s, our omega-9s, our omega-3s, which have anti-inflammatory effect. Right. So, and you've got guys like Ross Walker, who's a metabolic cardiologist down here in Sydney. He begs people to stop eating so much grain. And this is the angle that the paleo guys try to take. That's why they've got like a grain-free diet. They get the bulk of their carbohydrates from non-grain sources. And, also the benefit we have from eliminating or at least reducing grain from the diet is we do get rid of those lectins and phytic acid, these, anti-nutrient substances in grain that will rob us of mineral uptake.
Yeah, right.
So, there's every benefit for having more fat. There's every benefit for having more protein. There's every benefit for having a lower carbohydrate ingestion. There's every benefit for dropping grain lower in the diet. And the thing to remember is when you cut grain out of your diet, your carbohydrate drops anyway. Do you know what I mean? Like the amount of carbohydrate in one slice of bread is the same as 3 cups of the broccoli you discussed before. So one piece of bread is 3 cups of broccoli. Do you know what I mean? It's absurd, isn't it? You'll have 3 cups of broccoli and you'll say that's enough, thank you very much. But you'll have 1 piece of bread and you'll look for the other 3. So, a lot of our issue is to do with the fact that we're having very, our food is not nutrient dense. And as a result of the low nutrient density and the low uptake due to shit mineral stores and the like, people are just continually underfed, even when they're overeating.
Yeah, right.
Underfed, overeating. And this is why, you're
seeing chronically obese people that are suffering from
100%
from these
being underfed.
Yeah,
underfed. And that's why, like we talk about what I do. I'm a product formulator and I manufacture supplements for my company and for others. But that's why my best selling product is Cell Charge, which is basically putting back into the body what we just can't get through our foods anymore. And I can't tell you the amount of people who will have that and will find their appetite levels drop significantly. And it's just because they're getting more into their cells. They're better fed with less food.
Yeah.
So, and I know that's a big part of your diet. You might say, look, I don't eat, until 4 o'clock or whatever, but I bet that meal you have at 4 o'clock is very nutrient dense. I know you take things like Cell Charge. I know you use exogenous ketones, which are essentially a 4th macronutrient. So even though you're not eating, you're drinking a macronutrient that's giving your body an energy fuel.
Absolutely.
Without having to feed it.
So one of the things I find fascinating is people have cheat days, right? And I love having a cheat day because it's almost like a psychological regulation.
Yeah,
I can go out, once a week, and for the 2 meals that I have on a Saturday,
just do what you want.
I'll fucking eat whatever, right? Eat whatever, drink whatever within reason.
Yeah.
What's interesting now, when I used to cheat day before, when I was on like the diet or measuring calories and proteins and everything else, I'd always overeat. Whereas now when I cheat day, I don't. I never overeat anymore, which is kind of bizarre, considering I used to be.
You find a little bit's enough though, don't you?
Well, absolutely. You get satiated very quickly. But what I find amazing is, on the weekend I went out and I smashed a couple of donuts, I smashed some meals, I had some sake, had some beers, and I woke up the next day and looked at me, I was like, I'm leaner. And I find this is...
I thought the sakes had gone to your
head. No, maybe I was still drunk. But no, I find this, and I've found this, because I've been, training and bodybuilding from a younger age.
Yeah.
But I found when you sometimes mix up, when you are in caloric deprivation on a regular basis, and then you do, provide an excess in calories, what is it that creates that ability to
well, yourself from a bodybuilding standpoint, having been one in the past, leading up to a physique comp, people will be low carbing it for, up to 5 months, depending on the person. But what do they do in that week out? In that week out, they start to water deplete, okay? And because they've water loaded hard, 6 to 8 liters a day, they start to water deplete, a couple of days before the event. The day of the event, they're completely at the point of being dehydrated. But the night before, they carb load, all right? When they carb load, it gives that volume. Okay, because it increases that glycogen store once again. That's why you look better. It pumps your muscle cells.
So I'm not
up.
getting leaner.
Well, you're leaner by default because of what you're doing 95% of the time.
There we go.
Do you know what I mean? Yeah, for sure.
Brilliant stuff. Shannon, mate, you are a fucking wealth of knowledge, mate. You really are. You're a fountain. No, you're a fire hose of knowledge. And I love drinking at your tap. That just sounded so wrong in so many ways. So
Please don't drink from my tap.
Don't drink from your tap. Mate, I've loved having you here. And we do have... a slight time constraint, but there was one more question I did want to ask you.
Yeah.
And that's the importance of hydration, because I honestly think that that's something that is really overlooked.
Yeah. Hydration is vital.
Yeah. What is good hydration, first and foremost?
Yep. Good. Well, that's a difficult one. People will know, people who aren't well hydrated don't often want water. It's the strangest thing.
Yeah.
People who are like, I only have like 500 mils a day. And I don't know why it is, but dehydrated people never have a lot of thirst. But what happens with these people when you start to hit their numbers where they need to be, all of a sudden they start finding that like 2 liters has gone by 2 o'clock, and now they start to get to this point of being hydrated well again. So adequate, look, and there's a lot of maths around hydration. People are like, you should have like this many mils per kilo and whatever. I've never found any of that to be optimal, to be honest with you.
Yep.
Yeah, as a minimum sort of, let's say a 50 kilo woman, she wouldn't want to be consuming less than about 1.2 to 1.3 liters of water a day. You know, so as you start to work your maths upwards from there, like us, sort of 90 kilo type men, you're looking at the need for like 2.5 to 3 liters a day of like good quality filtered water.
I'm 86 kilos.
86.
Now.
Yeah, I'm 87. I'm 87. I got one on you.
Oof, Jesus.
Yeah. So, but you get my drift.
Yep.
So it'll go up not just with weight, but it'll also go up with use. So obviously athletes have got a much higher requirement. They'll generally require like half a litre of water every hour just to stay hydrated based upon sweating. People who are in, like I'm up there on the Gold Coast, it's been hot, you drink more. In the heat, you need more because you're sweating more. So, as a general rule of thumb though, for the average like business person, it'll all come down to your lifestyle. So how many coffees you're having per day. Like every coffee you have, you're now like down a glass and a half of water. Now, which is why if you go to places like Italy or France or somewhere like that, when you order a coffee, they give you a water with it. That's just custom. When you have a coffee, you have a water. It's just a known thing. Over here, people will be 3 and 4 coffees down and they've only had like half a glass of water today, So for every coffee you have, you need to be looking at that sort of glass and a half of water just in order to put back in what, the diuretic effect of that's going to be. That's a good benefit of exogenous ketone use. It's also a diuretic, but people who will use exogenous ketones will often have it in 600 to 800 mils of water. So as a result, they're increasing their hydration rate just because of their macronutrient intake choice. But I think if people, just to keep it real simple, if people were kind of having no less than sort of 2 to 2.2 liters of water per day, that's a general good place to sit. Things like herbal teas count towards that. Cups of tea don't. Once again, the tannins in there are diuretics. With a cup of tea, you're sort of down like half a glass of water now. So avoiding too many of these diuretic based substances, pre-workouts, et cetera, et cetera.
How can we hack hydration? Is there, because in my opinion, most people fuck hydration up because they ruin good hydration with a bad sports drink. They put sugar in their mouth with the water water that ends up, having, a similar effect. Is there anything we can add to our water that will increase the uptake of, at a cellular level of the water?
Yeah, cell charge.
Bingo. But also, I think it's important for people to understand the importance of the molecular health of water.
Yep.
Because one of the things that I've learned from you is, if we're drinking, hard water, which is come out of a tap, it's going to have a molecular profile that's going to make it really hard, I should say, for the body to absorb.
Yep.
Whereas water that's been perhaps filtered and had certain minerals or even remineralized in certain ways,
Yep.
It's going to have a different cellular profile that would make it a lot easier for its uptake. And with a fucking 100 different water filters on the market, what's the best water we should be putting in our body?
It depends on your outcome. So,
Yep.
With water, some people are happy just to buy like a Brita filter or something like that and just like filter the microbes out of it.
Yep.
Do you know what I mean? Other people get obsessed about, filtering, toxins out that, may have been in the pipes and things, like heavy metals and stuff. Do you know what I mean? And they're going to step up to, like underbench filters, twin filter systems, like with, pre-filters.
Yep.
And then you've got people who go up to like reverse osmosis that are wanting to, reduce the total content of solids in their water. The thing with water, though, is that, like, if you're going to get real anal about it, you've asked me something that I'm passionate about here. And, like, if you're going to get real anal about it, there's only really one water, and that's hydrogen-based water.
Yep.
Molecular hydrogen is really where for me, it's right up there with the biggest advancements right now in where science will go. And, molecularly speaking, hydrogen is the smallest. It's the smallest molecule. It's therefore able to influence every cell. It's a gas, so it diffuses. So, people who are serious about their water and serious about their health from an anti-inflammatory perspective, from a longevity perspective, they're moving towards molecular hydrogen-based water treatments,
Yep.
Which basically put these hydrogen ions in your water. Hydrogen, obviously being a gas, they do diffuse. So you need to drink the water within a couple of hours of actually producing it through one of these filtration systems. But it has the highest antioxidant rate. It's also what we call a selective antioxidant. So it only hunts down the damaging hydroxyl radicals that cause the major issues with cell integrity.
Right.
And in doing so, it also has the ability to upregulate our prime chief antioxidant, glutathione peroxidase, which is produced by the liver. So, for me, like if you go and buy like a Mount Franklin water, for instance, it's just as dead as the shit coming out of your Sydney tap water, But, the molecular hydrogen waters are the way to go. They're expensive, but seriously, like I put 4.5 to 6 liters of water into my body per day. I see water as probably the number one like essential thing that I put in my mouth. And it's the thing I can control the best. Do you know what I mean? Like I can't really control where my broccoli is grown,
Yep.
organically or not.
Yeah, right.
I can't control a lot of the growing techniques. I can't control the soil deprivations. I can put things back in, but with water, I can actually control what I put in my body.
Yeah, I like that.
So I'm a big fan. And once again, not to stress people about it, because like these machines I'm talking about, you'll pay anywhere between, like $2.5 and $6,000 for them,
Yep.
But once
It's like
again,
a Kangen or something.
yeah, things like that. Kangen's a good example of one company that's doing it. There's other companies out there. If people just Google, molecular hydrogen water, there's a whole bunch of different units you can get. Unfortunately, a lot of them are distributed just through distributors. So some people are okay with that. Some people aren't okay with that.
Yep.
But the quality of the water is absolutely exponentially that far above anything else, So, like normal water it's in a pro-oxidative state. Okay, so now I require those micro minerals, those antioxidants, in order to mop up the oxidation just from the water I'm drinking.
Yeah, right.
All right. So when I have a molecular hydrogen-based water, not only have I got a non-oxidative water, I've actually got an antioxidant-rich water. So rather than having to just mop up the damage I'm doing from just another thing I'm consuming, i.e. water, I'm actually putting something in that doesn't have the damage to begin with, plus gives me the molecular hydrogen, which will help with the disruption of other toxins that I'm getting environmentally.
Yeah, right.
I realize it's a really complex discussion as well. And like always, I keep myself available to any audience.
Well, that's what I was going to go next. Like, because obviously we've talked about Cell Charge, an incredible product. I've been using it for years. But for people, if they want to find out more about Cell Charge, if they want to find out more about you, and because I know you not only have your own podcast, the Traveling Wellness Show, which is fantastic. You also have, you do consults with people all over the world.
I do.
So how can people find out more about you? How
so
can they get in contact?
The easiest way to contact me is just direct email, which is Shannon@shannonbrenton.com. So Shannon, SHANNON, Brenton, BRENTON.com. I always reply to everyone. So anyone who's got any specific questions about anything related to today or would like to organise an appointment, I do all that myself. Anyone overseas, I do Skype consults. In Australia, I do phone consults, and they all work really well. So I can set people up, on any sort of parameter protocol, put them in contact with the right people if they want a water machine or whatever. I can help people, all that sort of stuff. If anyone's got any existing complaints that they would like help with, once again, that's done under clinical consultation, because I obviously have to do a fairly thorough case history. I've got the Traveling Wellness Show podcast available on iTunes and all the Android apps and all the rest of it. People get some really cool stuff on there. Traveling Wellness Show on Instagram and Facebook, and just flick me a like on Facebook too, Shannon Brenton. Happy to befriend anyone who's interested in health and help people along their journey.
And you are really one of the top in your field, mate. So I appreciate the time. You're coming all the way from the Gold Coast to be with us today, mate. Thank you so much, brother.
Thank you, Kerwin. Thank you, audience. Thanks for listening, and here if you need help.
Brilliant. There you have it, guys. Thanks for tuning in to Unstoppable with me, your host, Kerwin Ray. And do me a favor, don't forget to drop me a review on iTunes. Would love to hear what you think. I love reading what you guys have to say, and your reviews make sure we keep creating killer content just like this. If you want to stay up to date with me and all my movements, please jump onto the website kerwinray.com, and also check us out on social media at Kerwin Ray.